is prepping to stream right now. So
Okay.
I'll let you know and it'll show on here when we're going live. It still says it's setting up. So
Okay.
just a second, but you can, yeah, get all set up.
Cool.
Okay, Eric, it looks like we're good to go. If you want to jump in, let everybody know what we're doing here today.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Jessica and the City of Battle Creek, for having us today. My name is Eric Kehoe. I'm with Progressive Companies, also known as, or formerly known as Progressive AE, and we are working with the City of Battle Creek on a new plan, a new visioning for the Lakeview DDA area. So the Beckley Road corridor, the mall site, the linear trail with the park, and some housing south of Beckley Road. Capitol Avenue is in part of the plan, and yeah, the library, quite a few really important sites as part of the city. So over the last few months, we've been doing quite a bit of community outreach, data gathering, and other kind of, I guess, research on understanding what the current conditions are of the LDDA, how it's working for people, what some of the challenges and opportunities are there. So this is a presentation that we gave to the Battle Creek City Commission a couple weeks ago, and we wanted to share through the city's social media channels to make sure that folks had a chance to see it, ask questions, that sort of thing. So I'm going to go through this presentation now and just kind of give you, I mean, there's so many really interesting and just unique features of the DDA area, the Lakeview area, and a lot of opportunities there. So it's hard to condense it. We've been having a lot of fun kind of getting into the weeds on what's been going on there, but want to share with you kind of the high level overview of what's happening in the LDDA and give everybody a chance to ask questions and that sort of thing. So feel free to put comments in the comment box. My email will be at the end of the presentation too. You can always email me if you have questions. And yeah, let's kind of go into it. Oh, James, do you want to introduce yourself too before I keep moving on?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. James Kilborn, project planner as part of this. Been doing a lot of the data gathering and mapping for this. So again, just happy to be here and reporting out what we've learned so far.
All right, just to kind of orient everybody, this is really the study area. This is what the Lakeview DDA boundaries are. And just so everybody knows, the DDA it stands for Downtown Development Authority. And that really is a tool that the city of Battle Creek can use to collect tax revenue from the area and use it to fund improvement for the area. So this was started in the early 80s and it's been maintained since. And yeah, this is kind of the boundaries that we're studying right now. So you could see Capitol Avenue and I-94 intersection up here. A little bit of the area north of 94. Obviously the Beckley Road corridor, and not everybody realizes, but the city boundary or the DDA boundary really stops at M66. So a lot of the retail and businesses that you might go to on the other side of Beckley or on the other side of M66 are part of Emmett Township. And then through the middle here, there's the Brickyard Creek and the linear trail, which is really a beautiful asset of the LDDA, something that we really want to try to leverage and highlight. Down here, there's quite a bit of housing, including the Redwood apartment building, which isn't on the satellite. You can see it under construction here, but that has been a very good success recently. So I guess the northern part of Capitol within the DDA, quite a few medical buildings. Obviously a new hospital facility, Sweetwaters, which is always a hit with folks. And then, yeah, at the mall up in this top corner is Horrocks, also another big, a popular local business. And then kind of down here along Whitmark is a lot of parking and a lot of potential is what we're seeing for new growth. So how do we understand kind of what's going on in the DDA? How do we get to where we are now? A lot of this was through community engagement. So we did a retail and housing survey, which gathered over 1,300 responses. Online comment forums, social media comments, we've been getting, over 100 responses through various online forums that the city has really done a great job helping us push out. 4 different focus groups. So we've talked to stakeholders in other local governments that are near Battle Creek, so some of the neighboring townships, as well as Calhoun County. We've also had a focus group related to housing. We had a focus group specifically comprised of property owners on the mall site. Not everybody is aware, but there's, I think, about 5 different owners that make up the mall site. So it's kind of parceled out that way. And then we had a focus group on mobility as well, which is really paying attention to how folks can get around without using cars, whether that is walking, biking, rolling, and public transit as well. We've been holding monthly steering committee meetings, and these again are stakeholders from a variety of backgrounds, everyone from the Kellogg Foundation to the community college to the transit authority. We held a walk audit, and many of you might have seen some of the images that Jessica and her team posted on the City of Battle Creek's social media pages. But a group of us, James was on this, a group of city staff and volunteers and folks from Progressive. About, how many people were there, James, would you say?
I'd say we probably had 15, 20 folks out on the walk. It took
Yeah.
about probably a little over an hour.
Yeah, and that really, like, boots on the ground, kind of understanding what it feels like to walk around the LDDA, what some opportunities are for making it a little friendlier and safer for pedestrians. So that was a really beneficial exercise. We held our first public open house at the mall, and that gathered 40 attendees in person to come see some different images, participate in some visioning exercises. That was a great success. We've had this is now our second online forum, and we had 3 pop-up tables to really try to, gather more support or just kind of awareness that the plan is happening. And there's going to be more to come. I wanted to give a shout out to Jessica and the Battle Creek comms team. And as part of this presentation, this was for the city commission. So I really wanted to give kudos to the folks that we've been working with. It's been a real treat to work with the city of Battle Creek on this project. And not every community has the ability to really get the word out through social media. So kudos to the communications team in the city for helping spread the word. Some of the other things that we've done have been data collection focused, so kind of more on the quantitative trend analysis, I guess. So demographic trends from census data, land use analysis and mapping, so understanding how we're using the land that's in the area. Taxable value per acre and understanding site ownership. So that's really just kind of a measure of how productive land is for the city's tax revenue. Traffic and crash data, so looking at where the most severe crashes are, what the congestion is like. Obviously, that is an issue that has been coming up throughout the process. Studying the pedestrian and bike network, and the bus network as well. So understanding what the bus system is like and what it's like to get on and off the bus at certain stops in the area. Also understanding kind of, if you lived south of Beckley and you wanted to walk up to Target, what challenges might you face? What opportunities are there to increase some pedestrian activity so we can make it more of a place that people feel comfortable walking and taking time. Infrastructure mapping and analysis. So we've done research on really what the city's infrastructure is in the area, including roads, but also sewer, water, that sort of thing. And archival research, so taking a look at some of the history and historical patterns and kind of the historic events that have happened that got us to where we are today. So here's what we found. The first thing I think it's worth mentioning is talking about the market demand. So one of the things that popped up is that there is a really good demand for retail. Right now, there's the perfect amount of retail space, more or less. So based on current projections, there's 2.3 million square feet of retail space, and the demand is going to remain around 2.3 million. So that's worth keeping in mind. Mall vacancy is high. So obviously, I think, if you visit the mall, you know that there's been challenges in trying to keep tenants in the mall. Interior mall vacancy is really high, but the Beckley Road vacancy, and if you're a business that's auto oriented and you're trying to find a place to put your business on Beckley Road, that can be difficult because the vacancy along the corridor is pretty low, and it's in pretty strong demand. There's a thing called reciprocal easement agreements, and that's something we don't need to get into big detail on, but it's something that not everybody cares about when we're thinking about redeveloping sites or making malls into something different. The owners of a site have agreements with other owners of the site that for example, you won't put a building in front of my sight line from the road. So you don't have, I have clear access to the road. I have an agreement set up with my neighboring properties that can't be changed. So those are some of the issues that can come into play when trying to redevelop commercial areas, and just something to be keeping in mind. Mall redevelopment. This was a graph that I think kind of shows the challenges of mall redevelopment. And what we did was we compared Briarwood Mall and Lakeside Mall, two other mall sites in the state of Michigan that have announced huge redevelopment plans where they're kind of taking these older malls that were developed in the 50s, 60s, 70s and turning them into more of a neighborhood. And I feel like a lot of folks have seen images of this type of thing on social media and in the news. It's a really cool, exciting process, but also extremely challenging and extremely dependent on market demand. So one of the challenges in this situation with Lakeview is that, if you look at some of these population differences, it's just a much more populated area in these Briarwood and Lakeside Mall areas. And it's projected to remain even more popular as kind of time goes on. Also, there's a higher median household income in these two mall areas, and the home values are higher as well. So putting all that together, it's basically to say redeveloping the mall isn't as, I guess, realistic at this point, or as possible as it would be at some of these other sites. And again, this kind of goes similarly. It's important to keep in mind Calhoun County's population is projected to slightly trend upward over the next couple decades, whereas some of these other redevelopment sites, they're really located in some of the few areas in the state of Michigan that are exploding in population. So kind of just to summarize, understanding mall redevelopment and what opportunities there are at Lakeview. There's at least, there's 5 owners, and that can make coordination difficult because some owners are interested in redeveloping and selling. Some owners are happy with how things are going and their business is successful. The market is just a smaller market compared to some of the other redevelopment sites for malls in Michigan. And a lot of times in urban planning and this kind of redevelopment work, most people talk about this from a book called Suburban Retrofitting, and they kind of divide it into 3 paths where we have redevelopment, which is really like, you take this mall and you flip it into a completely new neighborhood, right? And that's kind of the most intensive style of redevelopment. Regreening is where you take an older mall site and you return it in some way to how it used to be. In the case of the Sears, that was built over the creek and rerouted the creek. So there's potential opportunities for regreening and reinhabitation, which is kind of a lighter, more, I guess, faster, easier, quicker way to get some redevelopment happening. It's just to come up with creative ways to re-inhabit the space and use it. So a good example of that is in Holland, GRCC took a big portion of the West Shore Mall building and turned it into a technical training center. And there's kind of trends of that across the country. Thinking about housing demand, so if we're thinking about trying to build housing in the LDDA, our projections, between 75 and 225 non-senior housing units over the next decade, and then between 100 and 200 senior housing units. So there really is some opportunities to develop housing in the LDDA. Housing is in demand statewide. We're in a housing crunch. The best way to, in my opinion, the best way to measure that is to look at the vacancy rates. So in a healthy market, you want around a 5 to 7% vacancy rate for your properties. Most of Michigan is at like a 2% vacancy rate. So, you want to have vacancies on the market. So if people are trying to relocate to Battle Creek for jobs and that sort of thing, they have a spot that they can get an apartment really quick and just move and start working. So that's kind of the challenge that we're in statewide. On this chart on the right, it shows how the age distribution has changed countywide over the last decade. And I think this is something that folks intuitively might notice, but countywide, it's getting much older. So the 65 and older population is growing, while most of the other cohorts are declining in population within the county. So I think, again, this really points to there's a huge demand for senior housing. If you want to downsize your home and live in more like a walkable senior community, there's definitely opportunities for that. I think that's kind of interesting about the LDDA is that, if you think about the housing, the apartment units that are over there, it's a significantly younger demographic than the rest of the city or the state as a whole, which is interesting because it kind of bucks the trend of the county and what the county has been experiencing. But the LDDA the average age is 30, whereas in Michigan, the average age is 41. So there's a huge difference there. And it's also more diverse than some of the other parts of the state, and kind of similar diversity to the city of Battle Creek as far as kind of ethnic and race diversity. So besides the market demand, there's really three themes that have come up as part of the DDA kind of fact-finding mission that we've been on, and they center around green infrastructure, placemaking, and car dependent. And I'm going to get into all three of those here. So the first one is green infrastructure. Green infrastructure is really just a trend among stormwater management to replace some of the quote unquote gray infrastructure. So big sewers and surface parking, that sort of thing, with green infrastructure that really kind of mimics the ways that natural environment absorbs water and manages water, and trying to replicate that in our own built environment. So the findings within the DDA, there's limited public park space within the LDDA, but existing green space is truly an asset. Flooding, stormwater management, and the maintenance and ownership of retention ponds are all concerns within the DDA, and the DDA has an oversupply of surface parking. Some of the comments that came through our surveys and online responses: so often in Battle Creek, I feel there is a park or playground nearby, and yet Beckley is a sea of businesses and traffic lights. It would be nice to see some of the unused concrete areas balanced out with some natural landscaping, more trees, flowers, etc. The mall does not have a lot of outdoor space, such as a park or benches to be outside on sunny days. Some of the historical research that we did, I don't think it's as well known now compared to when this shopping center was being developed, but there was pretty strong opposition to the shopping center on mostly on the grounds of rerouting the creek, which naturally runs under where Sears is now, and they rerouted it around the shopping development, and also kind of taking away some of the pervious or green areas and putting parking over them. Those were the kind of the two big concerns of the DNR at the time. And there was a lot of back and forth. There were a lot of concerned citizens that spoke out against the development. As far as surface parking, this is a rough estimate of the parking that's required by the city's current code. So this had been changed recently. It wasn't always like this, but if we built the amount of commercial space that we currently have, if we built that all today, the city would require a little over 6,000 parking spaces. But because of some of the historical requirements that were, parking requirements are typically arbitrary, and a lot of those arbitrary requirements led us down this path where we have over 18,000 parking spaces as an estimate within the DDA. So way more gray asphalt than we need. And the kind of fun thing about that is that it's an opportunity to do something unique and new on those sites. And there's the trends as far as how the climate is changing within Calhoun County. I think it's important to note that there's definitely an increase, and the big one to notice here is the historical rainfall events. So total precipitation annually is going up over time, but the historical rainfall events is increasing even quicker, and that's basically kind of a downpour flash flood scenario. So we're going to see more of those kind of deluges of rain, and it's going to be difficult for our infrastructure to keep up with that, which makes the case for green infrastructure even that more important. And then there's also days, it's getting hotter in the county and across the state. So we're increasing the number of days above 90 degrees. And when you're dealing with an area that has quite a bit of surface parking, that can exacerbate the issue and make it feel even hotter. Placemaking. So placemaking is it's a term to kind of embody all the different things that we can do to make an area or a neighborhood feel like a community, feel some sort of cohesion and public vibrancy to it, and just all of the great places and cities and resort towns and tourist towns that you like to visit. 9 times out of 10, they have these placemaking elements that make them places that you want to just spend time in, hang out, people watch, that sort of thing. And really the DDA, this LDDA area wasn't developed with placemaking in mind. It was more developed along this commercial strip and really maximizing auto-focused growth. So one of the things that we've been looking at is how do we incorporate some more placemaking to make it really feel more like a neighborhood and an area that people want to spend time in. But based on that, there are 3 findings that come up. Existing space for infill development. So that's kind of where I'm getting at with the surface parking. There's also limited friendly recreation options, public gatherings, and community event space. And then there's residential and commercial uses that are separate, but an opportunity to kind of integrate those a little better and develop more of a cohesive neighborhood. Some of the comments we've heard: our family really benefits from all of the restaurants and businesses being so close, and we love that, but we also have a toddler and teenagers and wish there was something fun for them to do close by. More entertainment for kids, trampoline, bounce house park, laser tag, etc., outdoor outfitting store, rock climbing, or ninja gym, and I love Horrocks. So to me, I think Horrocks comes to mind as like it has that placemaking element in a lot of ways because it's a destination that people really like to just hang out and spend time in. That's a really nice aspect of Horrocks. If you think about the DDA, there isn't a playground within the DDA that's a public playground that people can just hang out with their kids. So there's opportunities there for that. The library is really one of the best assets in the LDDA. So ways that we can think about trying to leverage that and use that even more. So opportunities there for sure. If we think about how we're using the land in the DDA, a good way to put it is there's no there. So, we kind of have a very spread out, low density style development, and that makes a lot of area to be used not as an area or as a place at all, but kind of in-between zone where you're not, if you count all the buildings and the green space as places that you want to go, then all of this kind of reddish area are places that aren't really places at all, but kind of the in-between spots that we don't really want to spend time in. Finally, car dependence. So as I mentioned, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that this area was developed with cars in mind, and really, it was a decision to prioritize driving in a car over walking to places or biking to places or taking public transit. So one of the big things we've heard, and we're continuing to work on this, and other cities working on this, is that the roads and the traffic are not currently working as is. So the signalization, I know we've heard from a lot of folks that getting through Beckley to get to the other side of M66 is really difficult, can be frustrating. But then there's a lot of roads that are actually way overbuilt, which means they have way too much open space for the amount of cars that go down them every day, which again provides opportunities for maybe doing something different. One of the lesser known findings, things that not everybody might be aware of, Whitmark Drive and Heritage Oak Lane are privately owned. So these are not maintained very well, and the main reason is typically they're not under city jurisdiction. So those are things that we need to be thinking about. There's also no really connected sidewalk or network for walking or biking. So as I mentioned previously, if I lived in Redwoods and I wanted to try to walk up to Target or some of the stores along Beckley, it would be a little scary at times because there's nowhere for me to go other than in the street lane. And there's minimal bus infrastructure. I think on the walk audit, one of the things that folks notice is, for example, in front of the physical therapy office, there is a bus stop, but it's on grass. So, and there really isn't an easy way to get to the PT office from the bus stop without walking through a grassy area, which can be difficult if you're someone who's trying to go get physical therapy and doesn't have a very easy way to get there. So, how do we try to leverage this Capitol Avenue route? There's a route that connects downtown along Capitol to the LDDA. It's the busiest bus route in the city, and there's some really nice potential, like, I guess, synergies or connections that we can make between downtown and the LDDA, as kind of the LDDA neighborhood is supportive of the downtown and vice versa, and maximizing that connection. So again, some feedback from everybody. Traffic light timing is terrible. I think, yeah, we've definitely heard that regularly. Would love to see large biking and walking paths along this whole area. It's extremely car centric. I see pedestrians walking in the tall grass along the road, trying to cross M66 without crosswalks, which can definitely be scary. And then better pedestrian connections between Target Plaza to mall, Hobby Lobby to mall, upgraded walking paths from Capitol Avenue and Riverside. This is an example of what we mean by overbuilt. So this is about the amount of, this is probably like the busiest that Glen Cross gets. There's not much traffic on it in a day. I think the average traffic count is maybe 3,000 cars. Whereas if you think about Beckley, that's about 16,000 cars a day. So huge difference, and almost the same amount of road space. So, what you could do potentially is turn this into 2 lanes, add some biking and sidewalk infrastructure, and connect this housing area to the commercial. Similar situation up here. So to our right is ABC Warehouse. This is Whitmark Drive, and then the parking area, just it's an overabundance of surface parking. And again, if I'm kind of walking from my house behind me and trying to get to Target, it really isn't a pleasant experience, and I'm much more likely to probably get in my car and drive it's a close walk potentially, but because of the unsafe nature of it and kind of how it feels, it's not very pleasant. So we're thinking about next steps now. It's really, we understand what the current conditions are, and we're working on developing some scenarios to tackle those conditions and address them in the best way we can. So part of this is going to be understanding how we think the city and other stakeholders should respond to these challenges, what we think the corridor would look like if it was successful, and who should the corridor serve. Is it going to be a redevelopment, re-inhabitation, re-greening, or a combination of those? And a lot of that is going to be through feedback from our public open house, which we're planning for July 17th. And we'll get a lot more information going out about that to help kind of get some feedback on some of our first initial concepts and ideas for how we might tackle these issues. So with that, I am going to say thank you. And if there are any questions or anything, I could put my email might pop up here, but I can put it in the chat if anybody ever has separate emails or questions that they have after the fact. But other than that, I'm going to stop sharing and take any questions or comments as they come in.
Thanks, Eric. Nothing from the Facebook stream so far.
Okay. James, did I miss anything that we wanted to touch on?
I don't think so. I think you covered the basis pretty well, pretty thoroughly. That picture of Glen Cross Road really is pretty stunning with the one pickup truck.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's just overbuilt at the time, so we got to figure out what we can do differently.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a question that's just come in, Eric. Somebody would like to hear more about what about connections to the existing linear park path that goes through that area?
Yeah. James, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, sure. So I mean that is something we've been looking into. Just from a non-motorized standpoint, how do people say from the arbors or other apartments, how can they better access, say, the Target area, also to, the mall itself? And that trail we find is pretty, people use it, but it's still very underutilized. And it really could be like a backbone for the non-motorized network in the area. So how do we better connect, these apartments to this trail is important. So that'll definitely be a component of this, is figuring out those sidewalks, those trails, connecting it.
Yeah, a lot of people might not realize that this is one of the more densely populated areas in Battle Creek. Just within that LDDA map, there's about 5,000 people. So I think thinking of ways that we can connect all of those folks and connect them to the trail and to the businesses without having to drive around. And I think that's going to go a long way. So that's definitely something that we want to focus on.
And
Hey,
Eric
Eric.
and James, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ted.
Well, I was just going to say, I think circling back on that question too, Eric and James, is that there's a lot of there's several miles of linear path existing in the city of Battle Creek across the entire geography. There isn't necessarily a great link between the portion that's south of Beckley Road and the rest of the linear path in the community. I think that's a great question the person may have been referring to. And we just recently did a study of I-194, the business loop going into downtown, because we know that MDOT, not in the near future, but in the next several years, is planning to replace that, and wanted to get some community feedback on what that ought to look like. And I think one of the strong messages that came out of there too was to connect this Beckley Road corridor area to some of the linear path in the downtown by using that stretch of land to create that critical connection too. So definitely on our radar.
And along with that, would part of that be looking at things like improvements to lighting along the linear park path? The same person asked about that.
Yep. Yeah, I think everything's on the table as far as that goes. Kind of like we mentioned, I think the linear trail, I mean, we definitely feel like that's like a huge asset, and it just needs some improvements. I think lighting would be a great improvement. We want to make sure that people are feeling as safe as they can feel using it. But I think lighting it, and and again, the more connections between buildings and between like walkways and that sort of thing, the safer it's gonna feel too. So I think lighting would be a great improvement.
Mhm. I think it goes back to just the lack of just public space in general, like public parks. Looking at this not as just a trail, but also just a public recreation area of where people can go to get some green space and get access to nature because it is very pretty back in there. So yeah, I think making it feel safer is definitely something we want to look into.
I guess just talking about some of the other things that we're going to be working on. So part of our scope is to identify areas where, okay, let's say, so we do need 1 to 200 senior housing units and 1 to 200 non-senior housing units. Where can we really fill those in and kind of fill out the LDDA more? And so we're going to be looking at potential development sites, see, all right, if we're going to really focus on trying to move things along and for some activity, what would be the best spot to do that? And obviously the mall comes up in a lot of discussions, but like I mentioned, there's a lot of challenges with redevelopment of a mall. So that's on the table, but then also thinking about, areas where there's an oversupply of surface parking and how can we retrofit that or redevelop that and make it into something that's really, really special. Well, any other comments or anything popping up right now?
Nothing's coming through at the moment, but we can certainly share your email, Eric, and we can share a link here in the comments in a few minutes that gives a feedback form that we have live throughout this process. So if anyone is watching this as a replay and you've got some thoughts or questions you want to send over to Eric and James and their team, then we'll make sure you have that link to do so. Oh, we just had another one pop up, gentlemen, about the water issues in the area that cause parking lot issues and how that will be considered.
Yeah, that's something that we can write down. I haven't heard specifically on parking lot issues, but that's something that we can definitely look into.
Great.
Eric, we do know, right, though, that kind of a broader stormwater management component is included in your analysis, right? And so we're certainly thinking about stormwater and how to handle it in that area. And in talking with staff, city staff, obviously we've identified some areas where there are some challenges there that need to be addressed.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think not as familiar with if folks if there's parking lot owners that have had challenges like maintaining their site because of the water table or that sort of thing. But on a broad DDA scale, one of the things that we're really trying to look at really closely is how do we implement some of this green infrastructure that, there's really beautiful examples of this kind of across the country that you're making it safer from like a stormwater management perspective. You're going to reduce the risk of flooding in the area, but you're also providing natural park space and kind of doing two things at the same time. So I think this is like a really opportunistic time to try to implement some of those things. So yep, definitely part of our analysis, and it's going to be part of the final plan too.
Well, it looks like that might be it for now, but we'll definitely put, again, the feedback form in there and Eric's email address so that if folks have more to say or more questions between now and our next engagement opportunity, those will be there for everyone to use.
Awesome. Well, I like this the Facebook live stream format. Let's do this one again. It'll be fun, and I'll feel more prepared to be on Facebook.
Perfect.
But yeah, I
Perfect.
think yeah, like you said, like, you know, anybody who's listening, if you have any concerns or questions or ideas about kind of the future of that area, feel free to shoot us an email or submit the comment form, and hopefully see you all. More to come information wise, but save the date for Wednesday, July 17th in the evening for a public open house and see everybody in person.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
All right.
Bye, everyone.